This story happened in 2018. I live in a small town in upstate New York with my mom and my grandfather. I put up a fence around my land that I made, sure that my fence only went around my land, not my nearest neighbor. Keep in mind my closest neighbor was about 150 feet from my house. He came to scream at me and my grandfather, claimed that my fence was on his property. It's 50 feet away from his. I went inside to get the survey of my land from my file cabinet in my office, just to prove to him that it was my land. He did not care, and he had the gall to grab it from my hand and destroy it. I had more than one copy, though. My grandfather and I went back inside because we did not want to fight with him anymore. A sheriff came knocking on my door, thinking that I put it on his property. I showed the sheriff another copy of my survey. He checked it with the building inspector. They checked it and found that it was not 50 feet away. It was only about 14 inches away from the neighbor property. The sheriff arrested my crazy neighbor for submitting a false police report. He got out the next afternoon. He immediately started complaining about the building inspector. He called him 13 times. Got to talk to the mayor of the town. He stopped harassing the building inspector, though. It all ended when he shot my living room windows with his shotgun. I came home to find my living room window shattered by a 12-gauge bullet that was on the coffee table and a shotgun shell on my front lawn. I called the police. They came and checked the game cameras with me, and they concluded that it was my crazy neighbor. They went to his house and arrested him. He spent 6 months in jail. Everyone in my house filed a restraining order on him, and he moved. I never saw him again. This story happened during 2020. I live in a small town in upstate New York with my mom and grandfather. I took the garbage out at about 1 a.m. I saw a man walking on my street, off in the distance, looking at my house. I told my mom. She sent me to try to find him to see if I know him, because I know everyone in my town. The town that I live in has about 300 people. I got in my truck to go find him, to find out what he was doing. I drove around the back roads and the country roads by my house for about an hour. I could not find him, so I drove home. As I was telling my mom what had happened, my mom was facing a window in my front door and saw the man shining a flashlight into my house. I did not see it because I was facing into the kitchen. She told me that she went to go confront him for trespassing and for looking in my house in the middle of the night. I chased him down the road, but I couldn't keep up. While I was chasing the man, my mom had called the police. As I was getting home, the police pulled up. They got there so quick because the police station is only about 5 minutes from my house. I gave them a description of the man and the footage from my Ring doorbell camera and my game cameras. They searched for him. They tried to identify him, but no one could identify this man. No one ever saw him again. I'm 30 years old, female, and a current student in nursing. 2020 Thanksgiving went from exciting to creepy for me. It started off with me passing an exam at 86%. Spending a pre-Thanksgiving with my boyfriend and his family. He was leaving for Cal Fire Base. This particular night before Thanksgiving, I spent at my brother's house. I left for home around 8 a.m. I woke up exhausted by my mental state turned manic. I was awake and wanting to get my sister a surprise gift from me and her kids because she hadn't replied. In my manic state, I decided to just go to her house. The day was fun. A lot of food, booze, and dancing. I loved it. Around 6 p.m., I planned my trip out of my boyfriend's temp house. We got into a bit of an argument, as I told him since it was a 3-hour drive, I'd start around 1 a.m. He did not agree with this, as he thought it would be too late, and a little dark to travel to a rural area, which prompted me to remind him that I am grown. Mistake, I know. He became a bit nerved and upset by this. However, later, we agreed on my arrival time. The festives went on at my sister's, alcohol fun, Thanksgiving family pictures, and food. Around 11 p.m., I decided to take a nap. However, my manic brain thought to shower, due to me needing help with running the shower and attempts to fix my hair. I ended up laying down around midnight. I decided to sleep until 1 a.m. However, I ended up passing out for over that time frame. I set an alarm to wake up at 1 a.m., but of course I slept through it. I was awoken up at 3:30 a.m. when my sister asked me, "Why didn't you leave?" I woke up and desperately moved as fast as I could out of her house. I left my phone, then had to turn around and go back. Once I retrieved the phone, I was on my way for a second time. I ended up going the wrong way, as I mixed up two city names, because they both started with CH. Once the GPS was on, and I realized that I was going in the wrong direction, I was on my way. The first hour seemed to be frustrating, as at the time I thought I left my vape pens. Thanks to my sister telling me that I left my pens, which she meant actual pens, not her fault, but mine. I did find them 2 days later in my purse, though. Once leaving the city lines, or Sacramento, I got into a race with a Silverado, but was lifted, and my jealousy that I was in an SUV versus a beautiful truck. I decided to take on the race, until I reached about 120 miles per hour for about 10 minutes, decided that it wasn't worth the ticket. At the time, it was just me, the Silverado, and a fellow Ford on the road. About 5 minutes later, the Silverado had taken an exit. Now it was only me and the Ford in the dark area. During the drive, I noticed that the Ford was on the side of me, and at one point seemed to be close enough to my right side to swipe me. Due to my blindness in the dark, I was more focused on making it safely, and not focused on the car that seemed to even cut off other cars to be on the side of me. This was only a 2-lane road in one direction, so you can understand why it wasn't a bother. We made it to a small town that meant taking a major street for about 3 to 5 miles, going through stoplights. At one point I thought, damn, I hate when people are too close to me. It was annoying to me, but after 2 lights, the fellow Ford turned off, and I felt a bit childish for even caring. 2 or 3 lights down, as I made through the green light, I noticed a car turning onto the street, and being attentive, I noticed the car. It was the same car, and at this point my body started to shake as the car made sure that it was back on the right side of me, keeping up with the persistence this time. My head began to hurt, and at first I didn't understand the fear that was kicking in. Why would this car come back to the main street? There are only 3 other cars, and he's the one on the side of me. The fight or flight response began to creep up on me, and I didn't want to turn my head as if I noticed. In that moment, I did not want to call my boyfriend. What if I'm just paranoid? I've traveled alone for a longer distance at night before. Is alcohol still in my system? My boyfriend and mom will lose it if I call them. Why is this happening? Don't panic. In that moment, I saw a light turn yellow as we approached side by side. My brain went into rationalization and thought, don't panic. Stay calm. Ignore the headache. When the light turns green, stay. See if he goes. We approached the light and stopped. The light seemed to be much longer than all the others. I moved my eyes towards the fellow Ford on the side of me. The windows were lightly tinted, but I could see a hat and a person looking towards me. Then seconds later, look up at the light and then peer back into my passenger window. My head and heart began to become one, both in pain and fear. Then the light had turned green. There were 2 cars right behind us, but I stayed on my brakes. I didn't move an inch. I didn't see his car enter the intersection either. I turned my head to look, and I could now see more of the silhouette of the man's face under the hat staring right at me. I took off slowly to collect my composure and not to seem too scared. So he did, keeping my pace of slowly going through the intersection. I heard a car behind us beep the horn, and it was like a light switch. I noticed a truck in the distance through the last light that was making its way through the abyss of the highway that was only a 1-lane road. I decided to speed up to make the last light. So did the fellow Ford, keeping up with my pace. It seemed that he was trying to cut me off, but I went from 45 miles an hour to 65. The trucks were going slow, and now he was behind me, and so close that I couldn't see his lights in full view. In panic, I went off the side of the road as to pull off to pass up the truck. So did he. When I noticed he passed the truck and was still just as close behind, I noticed the second truck. I sped up to 90 miles per hour and went towards the left, which was into oncoming traffic, to cut off the truck. My rationalization was to speed. Even if I was pulled over, I'd be safe. So I hoped. I cut the big rig truck off and began to speed up, now able to see far behind me in the distance through my rear view mirror. I could see the car trying to cut off the truck to the right and the left. The cars were oncoming onto the opposite lane, and due to trees to the right, the Ford seemed to weave in and out of the lane. He was trying to erratically cut off the truck. By now, even the truck lights were far behind me. I was going about 120 and continued with no effort, as I am experienced with driving fast, and my adrenaline to flight made it easy. I was still shaking and crying, and the headache became bearable. After about 5 to 10 minutes, I slowed down to 80 miles per hour, and then to 65 after about 30 minutes. An hour later, I stopped at a store that appeared to have many customers, which prompted me to stop, as I was paranoid, and I couldn't be 100% sure that the Ford wasn't near me. I went into the store to grab food and coffee, but my appetite was gone, so I decided on just coffee and a smoke. Walking into the store, I saw both customers and employees give me a wide-eyed look, followed with a look of sorrow, which made me feel embarrassed. I was shaking, and my makeup had run all over my face from the crying, and I'm sure that I looked like I was coming off of drugs from the fact that my sympathetic nerve was transferring its hard work over. I was obviously coming down off the adrenaline. I went to pay for my coffee and request some smokes, but the shaking made it hard for me to enter my PIN for my debit card. I had to try this 3 times. Back to the car, I went in fear. My head pounded into my ears. I hoped some tobacco would calm me down. The smoke seemed to help me calm down just slightly, but the shaking and headache persisted in a bearable manner. The sun was coming up, and I was almost there. I was still shaking and still very upset, and crying on and off. Of course, when I made it to my boyfriend's, he could sense it and was able to get the truth out of me. I could see that he was upset, but he tried to console me with a hug and a kiss, and encouraging me to rest so I can calm down. It was hard to study that day. The headache persisted, and I stayed in bed. My boyfriend made the decision of me not taking any more late-night drives, and even made sure that I stayed in his dwellings until he was off and with me. It's days later, and it's dark out. I'm scared to even go out. I wish that I would have listened to him. 30 or not, no person, male or female, should think that it's okay to drive into rural areas at night. There are crazy people out there.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.